Hi, I'm Daisy,
Hi, I'm David.
and we're the MSA Crusaders. Hey, we're the MSA Crusaders, and we're here today with Jeannie Shaw, and she's going to tell us about her husband, MSA Angel Wyndham Shaw. No, Jeannie, tell us a little bit about how Wyndham's life went before he was diagnosed with MSA. What did he do?
Yes, my husband was a minister, and in fact, we both worked together in the ministry, and loved working together in that way, really helping people, and he was also just very active. He loved sports, loved to throw the football, loved to play basketball, especially loved fish. Fishing was his passion hobby, and he had a boat and went fishing when he could. He also had which I still have, golden retriever who would uh, accompany him on some of these trips as well. So yeah, yeah,
So,
very.
Jeannie, we're gonna start this podcast off straight to the point. Your husband's favorite football team, professional football. What was it?
Oh,
Oh no,
Patriots,
David.
Patriot.
Patriots all the way.
Oh no, I'm a Colts fan. Yeah, we got
No,
He
we got
got
to
to
stop
be
this.
he got to be there through the wonder years of the Patriots, though. I
Brady.
said
Yep,
he never even knew Tom Brady left.
that's
that's
awesome.
that's a good thing.
That's really cool. Now, tell us about his story and how he came to be diagnosed with MSA. Because it's
Sure.
very hard to be in.
Yeah.
Everybody's story is different there.
Right. Right. Yes. I would say he first started having symptoms about 2013. He had had a total knee replacement then, just because it was bone on bone, and just to try to help that, and that went okay. About 6 months later, the same year, he had another surgery because he had started having, um, I guess this was really the first symptom. He'd had some bladder, both retention and incontinence issues, and the urologist thought, perhaps this is from an enlarged prostate. So he had that surgery. The urologist thought, well, it doesn't seem so enlarged, what I was expecting. And, we never connected it to anything else. It was probably the first symptom, that and ED. But it was, uh, then that didn't help. It didn't help his symptoms, unfortunately. So
How
that
old
was,
was he at this time?
at this time, let me see, he was 67 when he passed. So that he would have been about
61,
63.
63.
Uh-huh. Yeah. 60, 62, 63, somewhere around there. Yeah. Yes.
So his whole journey was only about 5 years long.
Right, right. Yes.
And I could see where that might be running around in circles with doctors because I mean prostate issues are the number one issue
Oh,
with men,
right.
especially
Sure,
once
Yeah.
we get past 40, you know?
sure. And then do you want to know a little more about kind of how the journey went after that of
Mhm.
diagnosis? Yes.
Please.
Yes. So he started then, that was the first symptoms. And then he started having some balance issues, and went to see doctor, certainly for that. Which was the first doctor we saw? I don't even remember. It's all running together now. But for the balance issues, and they thought it was probably neuropathy of some kind. Not sure
Mhm.
why, but um,
At least they didn't tell him it was he was delusional.
no, they didn't. And he did a lot of physical therapy to try to, strengthen uh, himself, and with balance, he worked really hard at that. Um, but it really didn't get better. The balance issues. Um, there were, in fact, he went from having to use a cane. He fell a few times, just lost balance, and it felt unsafe for him to continue. Especially, I felt that, to continue to try to to walk because he was 6'3" and 225 pounds. This, he's
Yeah.
no
That's a,
Not
small guy.
only not safe for him, but for
yeah,
you.
it's a long
Right.
way down too. Yeah.
Exactly. And I remember one time even his scooter fell over, and it was like, he was at the park, and to get him up was really, really, really difficult. Um, and during that time, we kept seeing the doctor, and one specialist we saw did some blood work and thought he had a B12 deficiency, which this could be reversed. And so we were, as you can imagine, ecstatic, just, oh my goodness, this is,
Yeah.
something that could be reversed. So he had some B12 infusions, and it didn't get better.
Did they actually test him for B12?
Yes. And it was low. It was low.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Mine was low too. What about yours, David?
No, I asked him because my wife is B12 deficient, and I asked my doctor. I said, "Hey, can I get some shots?" He's like, "What for? Yours are fine." I'm like, "Okay."
I
Yeah.
still get them every month.
Yeah. And so then uh another doctor, because he kept being sent from one specialist to another. Um, the next one, in looking at one of his scans, noticed something that she thought was some kind of a vascular blockage. So he had, I cannot remember the name of it now, but they go in through the veins and take a look through there.
Hmm.
Um, and again, we were all at the hospital. We was going through this because she had said, if this is the case, and she really thought it was, um,
He would be cured.
it can be reversed.
Hmm.
He can be cured. And so uh, you can imagine when my kids and we were there in the waiting room, and the doctor came in and said, "Good news, he doesn't have this problem." So we were, yeah, it was
Like
horrible
you
news,
fell off
actually.
your cloud 9 and hit the
Yes,
ground hard.
yes,
And
exactly. Because then it was like, wow, this isn't going to get better. And then he went to a movement specialist, Dr. Vikram Khurana, who was at Beth Israel at the time. The Khurana lab moved to Brigham and Women's in Boston. Phenomenal doctor.
I have read about him.
He does a lot of work in research with multiple system atrophy,
Yes.
Parkinson, movement disorder diseases, and he diagnosed him with MSA. Um, you know, had a
Oh,
great,
he's the one that diagnosed it.
he's the one who diagnosed him, and, said, do everything you can now, was, um,
While you can.
yeah, didn't try to sugarcoat things, but had the
Hmm.
ability to be honest while giving hope. Wonderful, wonderful to work with. I mean, just, I felt very blessed with that.
I
So,
bet.
yeah. So he did, we even traveled a little bit during that time, but his his symptoms progressed pretty rapidly. It went from his lower body to his upper body pretty quickly. And after that, after one of the surgeries, his voice got very raspy, and it got progressively worse till it was hard to understand him.
So he had
Um,
some speech and
and
some
and he,
handwriting problems with
yeah,
the upper body.
he couldn't really use his hands anymore. So yeah, so that was difficult. And but I was in the ministry, was able to be flexible with my schedule and do a lot. I was in grad school and working still at the time, but he would uh, be there, and I would just do my work at night, and have meet people at the house, and my two sons were able to be very helpful. One had a ability from his work to have kind of a compassion, not a leave, but he was able to work home, from our home, 2 days a week, so that um, I could get a little bit of respite and also do my work as well.
Hmm.
And you have to do
So
that as a caretaker,
yeah, and so
caregiver.
yes, and I, if he dealt with the blood pressure drops too. There was a few times when I thought I'd lost him, especially if when he was still able to transfer to the toilet. I remember he was just completely passed out. I thought he was gone, and I was by myself there, so I didn't know what to do. Uh, I was able to get hold of my son, who came in and helped get him off the toilet into his motorized wheelchair, and I lifted him back, and I pulled him back and put his CPAP. He'd had a sleep study, and he had to use a CPAP machine, and put that on him. And after about 5 minutes, he revived again. He he had such an incredible spirit and attitude during that time. When
That's
he was diagnosed, he he said, every day I want to I want to commit to live courageous and cheerful and grateful and faithful. And he
that's
did
awesome.
till his last
Amazing.
breath.
Amazing words.
Can I ask, and I want to word this correctly, and forgive me if I don't, how does both of you, it sounds like you guys were both very involved in the faith, or call it
Yes.
the work of God, whatever you want to call this. What impact do you think that had on this, the outcome, in versus not being in a religious function like you two were?
Well, I think it made all the difference. The first thing, when he was diagnosed, first thing he did was read the book of Job.
Yeah, yeah. I know
And
Job. Yeah.
yeah, and just said, Job never lost his integrity. And uh, you know,
That
he said, I'm gonna, instead of asking why me, why not me? And he just had an incredible, just grateful attitude. We determined, we thought one day at a time. That's all we can do. Live one day at a
yeah.
time.
I
Be
told you
grateful.
about
Every
my
morning when I woke up, I would just say out loud, um, uh, His mercies are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And I think hope, and then knowing I would see him again. That that makes so much difference. And knowing you're not alone. Knowing you're not
Mhm.
alone.
as I told you before we started, I'm an author too, and that's some of my persona is a Job story. He never gave up on his faith as much as God kept putting on him. It wasn't why me, it was why not me,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
what can I do?
yeah.
But let me ask you, MSA is a very fast growing progressive disease. Did it affect him mentally negatively anyway?
Amazingly, no. I mean, um, I would say there, because in the ministry, there's a lot of things you have to deal with and process, and sometimes difficult things. I did, I did, there was a time I felt like I can't bring any difficult situations to him, because it was too much to process. He was cognitively good, but it was, um, like a lot of things going on around him
Overloaded.
would be too much. And so
Well, can I stop you?
Mhm.
I want to see if we're drawing similar parallels because I mentioned all my videos and people that I talk to. I said, the stimulus, the
Yes,
input, call it a basketball game, stadium, call it a dance floor, dancing, even a small dance floor, um, having an argument with the spouse or the kids or the neighbor or whatever. Any stimulus or input like that drives me, makes my symptoms go from manageable to the end of the world. Is
ab
that what we're talking about?
absolutely, yes, yes. And because I mean, he's one who would be the last person to leave church, talking to everybody. And I took him, in our accessible van and his motorized wheelchair, which I had to operate because he couldn't use his hands anymore. But I took him to church as long as I could, but we had to leave before it was over every time. It was the the just the stimulus of being around so many people, which was his life. It was more than he could the nervous system just doesn't work the same.
Yep.
Exactly.
Again, the cognizance is good, but the all the things
Physicalness.
going on, it's more than the body and the brain can process. And
It's
so
just so draining, right?
yeah, and so I kept our conversations, well, it was more um for a lot, he couldn't say a lot, so he would nod or smile, always very cheerful.
Yeah,
But
I'm told videos I watch, they may not be able to speak, but they will have a frown, a smile, and they know what you're saying. Like they don't know they're
absolutely,
happy, they just can't express it.
But
exactly.
then there's some that have that mask that you're not going
Yeah,
to get the expressions from.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And there was some of that, but he would I would say he could cry a lot easier and laugh a lot easier.
Uh,
But we tried to find humor and every single day and find things to laugh at, which
You have
some
to.
some things, yeah. I mean, when I'm putting him in his from his Hoyer lift to his portable toilet, and you know uh because you know bowel control and stop, that's a real thing.
Mhm.
And so I'd have to give him enemas while he's sitting there, and some of the potty humor we could
I can
Oh
imagine.
man, me and my husband have some stories.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
what about you caring for someone with MSA? It can be emotional and physical demanding on you as a caregiver. Tell me, how did you deal with the emotional
yeah.
part of it?
Yeah, well, I think I tried to have the same, his commitment to be grateful and cheerful and courageous and faithful. I had the same commitment. And my deepest desire was for him to have the very best day every day that he could. There were some days I would just have to go out and walk and pray because it was just so hard to see what he couldn't do. And there is a real there's different stages of grief. As a caregiver, there's the
Oh
anticipatory grief
yeah,
that every that because
you know it's
it's
coming to an
coming.
end.
It's different than the actual grief, which I thought maybe, okay, I've done enough grieving, but it's different. It's still really, really hard.
Well,
But
with you mentioning that, I'd like to know, did he make um, like advanced directives and things like that for
yeah,
knowing that it's coming to an end?
yeah, we he didn't want to he had a DNR, do not he didn't want to be on a tube. He didn't want to, he knew when the quality of life was such that he just didn't want that. Um and so honestly, 8 months before he passed, we called hospice, and it was an incredible decision. Um because I had gone to a women's event one morning, and he would always sleep late, and I had one son who wasn't married who lived there, and so he was able to be there, but he wasn't in the same room. When I got home, he was unresponsive and a very high temperature, and I thought we were going to lose him that day, very suddenly. And that happened to be the first day that hospice was supposed to be there. I'd never even met them before.
Oh
So I
wow.
called them. They showed up within a few hours, had everything we needed, a hospital bed, oxygen, everything. And then I met who would become his hospice nurse, Karen McKenzie, an angel. She was amazing through the whole process. And I learned that hospice was a support. It wasn't a death sentence. And even you could if you felt like, okay, you want to go to the hospital, get something treated, you can go off hospice. and go to the hospital. You can get back on. But the support they were was incredible.
Well,
They
I myself have another question though.
Mhm.
Was he ever in a lot of pain? Did he have to deal with a lot of pain with this MSA?
No, gratefully, he was not in pain. And my and the nurse would always say, are you dealing with any depression? And he said, no, I'm not. So it's very fortunate that he didn't have pain. Now he we had to deal with the difficulty of overcoming a few bed sores, and I it's amazing what you invent, the different things that you invent to try to
Mm-hmm.
make things more comfortable. But yeah, he had a very good spirit, and I'm grateful he really didn't have pain.
It's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's not when you're at your strongest; it's when you're at your weakest that defines who a person is. And
right, right.
like
It's
like you
true.
just said, that's speaks wonders about him.
It
Yeah, he was
does.
he was quite an amazing man, really was. I feel very blessed, and I felt as his caregiver, I know he would do the same for me.
And
But
I can see
I,
by
I
the
felt,
glow in your
yeah,
face that you just have this radiant glow about you,
thank
that
you.
you were a wonderful caregiver.
I felt like it was an honor to care for him. That's how I felt. It was an honor.
I was going to say, Daisy. I think the glow of her face is she doesn't have to be a Patriots fan anymore. I think that's probably
Jared,
just
you and
it's
that
a
football.
Well, that would be pretty discouraging this year for sure.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
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 it's a good
yeah.
team. Yeah, at least they're consistent. Jeannie, were there any support systems or resources you reached out to? Like, for instance, myself, my doctor said there's nobody for you to reach out to for MSA. There's no support groups, but they literally, but they said, there's this Parkinson's group, Northwest Indiana Parkinson's,
Yeah.
that they'll help you, and it's very similar. And to reach out to them for help and go through the motions of kickboxing and swimming, a whole bunch of stuff like that. Were there any? Now I haven't reached out to anybody really uh, past year to church or school. I see a therapist, I see a psychiatrist, I see a couple of those, right? But my family is my therapy session in itself. But did you have any support systems like did church come into it? Was
Oh,
it medical?
absolutely. I felt incredibly supported. One, our family is very close, and I have four children, and uh, uh, our youngest son we adopted when he was 12 years old from Romania, and he was living there at the house, and he's very strong, and he was able to really help uh, with some of the caregiving as well as I mentioned my son was able to get his work provided him a compassionate ability to work from our house twice a day because that was before COVID when working
Mm-hmm.
from home wasn't as common. And during those days, I was able to work, and also I would go. I tried to get. I would go swim, and I would swim laps, and I would put on worship music and fill up my goggles with tears, and that was very therapeutic.
Oh,
But
sounds like it would be.
yeah, 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 and I forget the question you were asking. What?
Just the support systems you had.
Yeah. Oh, yes. But and we have eight grandchildren. They were incredibly.
You said eight grandchildren?
We have eight grandchildren.
Wow,
Yes,
congratulations.
and they were a great support and joy. But the church was, there was always somebody coming to visit or help. To bring food, to offer rest. I mean, I had a great support system with the church. We had served there for many years, and were uh, had served people, and they wanted to really be able to give back.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, I had great neighbors, and uh, on and the um, Dr. Karana, and he was amazing. And then during those last 8 months with hospice, that team was incredible. They were great, great support, great help.
I am so
So
glad you had such a great support
yeah,
system. It
yeah,
means a
I am too. I knew of some places like the MSA page or Facebook page. Um, to be honest, at that time, it was more than I could
I'll say you
begin.
were grinning when you said that, and you're the second person in 8 episodes to say that page is it's a lot to take in. It's a lot of not MSA. It's a lot of MSA. It's a lot of bad. It's a lot of
Yeah, yeah,
heartbreaking things.
yeah. I was it was something I participated in it after more
yeah.
than before because it was, just okay, one day at a time, live in and I had mentioned earlier, I had a coworker and dear friend in the ministry who had gone through MSA and lost her life through that. So I was not unfamiliar. Um, but you can only handle so much grief and so much of you can't take on everybody else's.
And I
And
have to say that some of the episodes of us having the MSA Angel episodes, they're hard for me to take in.
I'm
You know,
sure they are.
I
I'm
can
sure
I can
you're,
feel it, but your story is completely different, Jeanie.
oh, good. Well, I think hope and my faith and our faith, it made all the difference in the world. I mean, hope's everything. And the support was truly wonderful and the family that was great. And I mentioned to you earlier, I also um I have three sisters, and one of my sisters, I mean, this is kind of unheard of with the rarity of multiple system atrophy. So when we have MSA Remembrance Day, I light three candles. I
Mm.
light one for
That's
my
why.
husband, one for my friend Rebecca that I mentioned, and one for my brother-in-law Wayne, my sister's husband. And there's no connection of any kind. They never lived in the same place.
And I'm sure having
My
that great
sister had
support
a husband with
system
MSA.
was really helpful in the aftermath too,
Sure. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
help you deal with
Yes.
his
Yeah.
passing.
Yeah.
If I could ask Jeannie, losing somebody, this is no easy way to put this question. Losing somebody, say, from cancer, it goes one direction. Generally, I mean, most cancer actually gets changed, but dying of cancer goes one direction. Somebody that's dying of I can only think of some, malaria. I mean, things that happen to us where unfortunately we pass away, and those actions are predictive. We know at this person is going to get worse, worse, worse until they eventually pass. What, in hindsight, what's one of the biggest, misunderstandings about caring for somebody with MSA because MSA is different for almost every MSA patient. It doesn't come on, it doesn't end the same. I get symptoms you may not have, and he or she don't have symptoms that I don't have. They come at different times, different levels. So how is that? Because unfortunately, we've all had people pass away in our lives, usually from old age, things like that. But
Not MSI.
yeah, and I'm gonna say, what would be different about MSA, the ups and downs of that compared to other.
Well, I heard its nickname is the Beast.
Yes, and it is.
Yeah. And when I try to describe it to people, all I tell them is it presents a lot like ALS, only it tends to be faster because they understand that. I see,
Yes.
even though there's different roots to it and causes, it works differently. It presents a lot the same. And I think it's trying to be hopeful while
There
there's no
may be
cure,
hope.
while that there is, that nobody as of yet has gotten better.
Nobody. Let me ask this. Were you ever able, obviously this is probably no answer, but with the progression of symptoms from your husband, were you ever able to get ahead and be like, okay, we know that this is going to happen on the road, so let's prepare for it, and you were actually prepared for it when it happened? Or was it just an up and down
Uh,
battle? You can never predict.
Other than that, uh, fortuitous call to hospice when we needed it the most, that was the biggest preparation. And everybody's going to make their decision, but they're an incredible support. And honestly, when somebody has MSA, it's one of those diseases that you can pretty quickly get hospice support, even if you're on it for several years. I found it very, very helpful. Uh, and I just had to look at it. This doesn't mean I'm going to lose him any faster. It doesn't. It's not a death sentence. It's
And that's
support.
why I turned it away because it makes me think, oh, that they, they came to my house and were going to sign me up. And I was like, I'm not ready for that yet,
Yeah,
because it's so
and
final.
yeah, and you have to, I really, and I realize that's an emotional and hard thing, and everybody has to make their own decision. But I did realize it doesn't change anything. It just gives you support and,
Yeah.
offers a lot of support.
Yeah, we've had that said before. I think our first or second episode, the lady she said, I wish I would have done it sooner. Knowing what she
Oh,
knew now after the fact,
oh,
she wished she
yeah,
did it sooner.
yeah, yeah. That's the thing, and I think that preparation was the most. And I think, especially because they knew more what was coming and how to prepare, and had things there before I even knew what I needed. Um, yeah.
Can you tell us what were some of your most cherished moments or memories you had with your husband, Wyndham, during this journey?
Yeah, I think sometimes realizing just the value of sitting beside someone. He couldn't talk, but I knew how much he loved me and he knew how much I loved him.
You didn't need words.
Didn't need words. And it was okay just to sit and be together. And
Oh, that's beautiful.
and
Making me cry.
So we got every podcast from now we're gonna have a box of tissues for Daisy
there
right
you
next there.
go. I get it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I made a decision at that point too. I decided to go back to grad school. And he was so proud of me and supportive of that. And I would do my work from about 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. because, in fact, yesterday I just successfully defended my dissertation. So that was a good
Congratulations.
step. And I felt his
Congratulations.
presence. I felt him being, so, rooting me on in that. But, um, you know, that was something, just being there, just sitting beside him. And he liked to watch sports. And, so
You
I could,
love those Patriots.
yeah, and the Red Sox and all that. And so, and that was something, honestly, I was grateful for television at that point, because it was something that was a little bit, it wasn't over. The things watched were entertaining, but when he couldn't talk, and it was just a little bit lighter to, he'd done a lot of heavy counseling of people and marriage counseling things for a lot of life. And you know and just realizing this was time to, um
For himself.
yes, for himself. And I think the couple precious memories were just the sitting with him, but and the times we found to laugh, just and we tried to do that, try to laugh about things.
Found humor in it.
Yeah, the last few days of his life, there were some very precious moments. He hadn't been able to talk at all for probably 5 or 6 months. And 2 days before he passed, uh, I was sitting there with him, and he looked at me and with a very loud voice said, "I'm going to die, and I love you." And yeah, and I just thought, to hear his voice and for his last words to be how much he loved me was just very precious.
Stuff that you always carry
Yeah,
with you.
yeah. And then when the next day, my son was out of town on a work trip, and I knew he would hold on until my son got back. And so my son came, but that night we didn't know what was going to happen so fast, because he'd rallied one time before. And my son's three little girls came over, and and he was tired. He wasn't doing well, and I said, "Would you like for them to come?" And so my daughter-in-law brought them over, and they just sang song. They have beautiful, sweet little voices, and they sang to him. And I know it was such a beautiful. It was a very special memory, especially when I think of one
Well,
of the things that they sang was, "He's got the whole world in his hands." And these little girls went through every single person in the family. He's got them in his hands, and they went through every one of our animals, every one of our dogs and their names. He's got them in their hand. I thought, what a beautiful thing to hear.
it's a very beautiful ending, and I want to thank you for coming and sharing your story with us. I
Thank
I could talk to you all day, Jeannie.
you.
You're
Yeah, well,
wonderful.
matter of fact, we should have you back on for a second because there's so
Oh,
much more to this. Could you tell us that you're an author of at least three
yes,
books or four? Can you
yes.
tell us the names of those real quick before we get
Yes,
disconnected?
it's this one, Wednesdays with Wyndham. There he is on his boat with his dog. I wrote this. This was kind of therapy, but there's humor and there's sadness, there's tears about things I learned from him, but through our journey as well. And this one I wrote afterwards called The Sacred Journey, Finding God in Caregiving. And I and some other people who've been caregivers in different ways put this together. I think very helpful. And then the last one I wrote is kind of just finding my way
What
again.
now,
Yeah,
God?
no God, finding God in transitions.
All right.
They're all
Well,
available on Amazon.